Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So taking a super fun and super exciting video for you guys today. That is because as of yesterday, at least as I record this video, Viewpoint 2064 was found and dumped as a final retail release, not the beta we've had for the last 2 years. And to say it's always amazing to get new N64 games, especially ones that never actually saw retail release, would be an understatement. And just so you know, this dump comes from Hard for Games, another YouTube channel, which definitely advocates for the preservation of all these lost games, just like I like to on this channel, so it's always commendable to see people find prototypes and actually share them with everyone versus keeping them for themselves, because I will always say hoarding is no fun, sharing is caring, and you get a lot more fun out of seeing other people enjoy games than you do just being the only person able to enjoy them. And to say this version of Viewpoint 2064 is enhanced would be an understatement. This is basically the complete retail version of the game. There's going to be a ton of changes to the level structure, a lot more graphics, a lot more cut sequences, and you can definitely tell that this was basically ready to get boxed up and sold on shelves. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. And even though I'm sure everyone would answer Mother 64 or Earthbound 64 for the game they'd love to see get found and preserved for N64, I love the fact that we get another shmup, because honestly, as far as genres on N64 is concerned, this is absolutely an anemic showing as far as the amount of shmups we actually got on the retail console. And the good thing is this game is just straight up fun. Yes, it's completely different than something like a traditional shmup, and I would say its closest approximation on the N64 would be Sin and Punishment as far as how the gameplay mechanics work. But if I'm comparing this game to Sin and Punishment, you know it's got to be good, because that is still one of my favorite N64 games of all time, not called Bomberman Hero. And getting more of a good thing is always a better thing, and that's exactly what we're getting with this dump right now. The full, at least is how it seems, retail release that just never actually saw a store shelf. And as to why the game was cancelled, I've heard multiple different reasons online, but it's one of those things. N64 cartridges were very expensive to produce, and Nintendo was not selling as many consoles as anyone had hoped for. N64 came in basically well behind the Sony PlayStation, and because those carts are way more expensive to produce than CDs, I can imagine that the publisher was probably just thinking to themselves, we probably don't stand much of a chance to actually make a lot of money on something like this game. We should probably just cancel it at the last minute and not invest in all of the actual marketing and the manufacturing. Because if you don't know, sometimes marketing, not for games but at least for films, can be half the budget of the actual production. But even if you're going to spend $1 million on marketing something like this, if you don't think you're going to sell enough copies to even recoup the development costs and manufacturing costs, you don't start throwing good money after bad, which is just an accounting thing, but it's the reality of game production and any other creative medium. You need to be comfortable that you're actually going to get that money back, or you don't keep proceeding. But that good thing is we don't actually have to buy this right now, because it is up on archive and you can just sit down and play it today. And if you're wondering, I'm using Rosalie's Mupen GUI with the Mupen 64 backend just because I absolutely love how it enhances this game. If you do want to play it on real hardware, and if you do want to play it on Mr. FPJ, you need to add a file, at least on the Mr. FPJ side of things, to make sure the core recognizes it, because it does require a little bit of configuring if you're using a flash cartridge as well. I did get it to run on my EverDrive X5, but because my N64 isn't modified for HDMI or RGB, it's just an S-video signal, doesn't really capture well. And as far as whether or not this runs on the Analog 3D, I have no idea. They've been shipping me that thing for 8 days, I paid for priority shipping, and it's still not at my house, so I don't really know as of the recording of this video whether it'll actually work once the flash carts work. It's one of those things we'll have to wait and see. But the amount of enhancements, the amount of additional content, and the amount of additional graphics here is just absolutely blowing me away compared to the beta, because you could always tell the beta version of the game was incomplete. Yes, you could play it from start to finish. Yes, it was a lot of fun, but you could see in sponsor there was placeholder graphics, definitely even in the intro cut sequence. Now you're going to get a hell of a lot more story, and one of the most charming, weird, eyeball spaceships you've ever seen. You basically have a buddy along for the ride the entire time. But do be aware the story is in Japanese and kanji, so you might have to translate that over. I just kind of imagine what that spaceship eyeball is telling to me, and I just kind of go from there. But this, again, is something that is just so fun to get. The N64 does not have a big library, so getting new versions of games that never actually got released is always fun. And if you're wondering, this eyeball right here, have no clue what he's doing in the game, but I absolutely love that he exists and is our friend. Let's move over to the first soundtrack sample, because the music in this one, absolutely outstanding. 45 seconds and I'll be right back with a lot more history of the game. Even in the soundtrack department, I get a little bit of a sin and punishment vibe. You will see here in some instances in the finished version of the game, and in a very few instances in the beta, you're actually going to get this isometric viewpoint like you did back on the original game, because this is a sequel to the original. But I love the fact that this is just used sparingly, because trust me, it's going to break your brain the first time you see it, because the controls don't really change, just the overall camera aspect in going to a 45-degree angle either to the right or to the left. The good thing is they don't really throw many enemies at you, so it is something that's easy to navigate towards. And as far as the gameplay is concerned, you don't go up and down as far as the actual elevation on the screen. You can move into and out of the screen, but you have that aiming reticle. Your shot fire is only going to hit anything on the ground, and then if you actually hold down the fire cursor and you go ahead and scroll over all the enemies like Sin and Punishment or Panzer Dragoon, you'll be able to lock onto them and hit them. And that is going to be a very big mechanic, and that's why I compare it to something like Sin and Punishment. I'd almost go Panzer Dragoon as well, but that obviously involves flying, where here we are still skirting along the ground. But that lock-on mechanic is going to be a big thing, especially for the boss fights, and especially for score attack, because you can defeat the boss without ever actually knocking any of the pieces of their ships off, but you'll see one just fell there. But the more pieces you knock off, the higher of a score you're going to get, and because some of those pieces will shoot at you, it can actually articulate and affect the boss fight ever so slightly. But the fun thing about this game is it's just straight up fun. I've always loved playing the beta, and I always wanted to see more, and you would think to yourself, a cancelled game probably wasn't a good game. But the reality is, a lot of times games get cancelled that would have been a lot of fun, just for some reason or another we just never get to play them. And there's definitely some Moses part in the Red Sea business here, even if the sea is blue. I really like this level in particular, going through this ocean with a valley cut out with the water basically running to your left and to your right. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, Viewpoint 2064, did you see previews for it back in the day in magazines? I remember reading maybe one article on it saying it was coming, and it seemed kind of intriguing, but if I'm being entirely honest, back in the day, if I had X amount of money for my summer job in my wallet, this definitely isn't the game that I would have purchased. I would have gone for a 3D platformer or a racing game. And even though in 2025 I've loved shmups and I'm so happy to have this, and I would tell my younger self you should buy a copy of this game, it's one of those things. I think it was just a genre that didn't see a ton of sales back in the day, and it's easier to cancel a project just even at the last minute knowing that you have an actual stated loss on paper than it is to make a bunch of copies of a game and find out that the loss you thought you were going to have is going to be exponentially higher because people didn't actually buy these things. Because some of the sales numbers on N64 games, especially the ones that weren't really successful, are absolutely anemic. But it's time for one more soundtrack sample, because even though the game didn't come out, the music's still great, and I'll be right back with more. Interesting, I get a little bit of a Toby Polystars vibe from this boss right here, because you have a giant squid in Toby Polystars hitting the water and making those explosions go up. And you have the exact same thing in Viewpoint 2064. I'm sure that is just a coincidence, but it is one that I really do enjoy. And that overall klaxon sound effect there definitely feels familiar. It'll leave me a comment down below and tell me what game it's from, because I know where that sound effect comes from, but I'm curious to hear if you do. But this is just the great thing about preservation, and a big thanks to Hard for Games for actually dumping this thing. There are so many games out there that people would love to experience, and for any reason, they basically just don't make it out into the world. They're cancelled and the prototype's lost. They're cancelled and the beta can't be found. But when files like this do exist, it's down to the community to make sure they get dumped, and that's why I'll always celebrate stuff like that, because trust me, I am always hunting for games, even if it isn't on the Nintendo side of things, arcade specifically, and I do know of games out there that do exist. They're in collectors' hands, and they will not make a deal for any number or any sort of trade out there to make sure those games see public book release because they really enjoy being the only person able to play that game, so much so that they basically brag about it online. And trust me, that is not a personality I understand whatsoever. Giving things away, watching other people enjoy them is some of the most fun you can have in gaming, especially on the preservation side of things, and that is why I will always advocate for it, and I'll always celebrate other channel successes in being able to dump stuff. So again, big thanks to Hard for Games and the entire team over there for getting this into the public consciousness. It's absolutely straight up a 10 out of 10 as far as the preservation is concerned, and I would say I'd give this game a score of like an 8.5 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10 depending on what mood I'm in. I totally get it's going to be a game that not everyone's going to love, but trust me, give it a shot. It is difficult enough to be a challenge, but not so difficult that you're going to feel like it's punishing you as you play it. But short of that, we're done. Go check this one out, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.